The rising sun painted the horizon in shades of orange as Captain Ryan Matthews climbed to the bridge of the oceanographic vessel Ocean Guardian. His eyes, accustomed to scanning the vast expanses of the ocean, settled on the crew moving about on the deck below. It was another day of routine patrol in the waters off the American coast, or at least that's what everyone thought. Ryan, a man in his mid-40s with graying hair and skin weathered by sun and salt, had commanded the Ocean Guardian for over a decade. Known for his unshakable calm and decisive actions, he was respected not only by his crew, but by the entire maritime community. "Captain, coffee?" offered Sarah, the young oceanographer who had recently joined the team. Her eyes sparkled with enthusiasm, eager for another day of discoveries. "Thanks, Sarah," Ryan replied, accepting the steaming cup. "Anything new in the night reports?" Sarah shook her head, her curly hair swaying gently. "Nothing out of the ordinary, Captain. Just some tuna schools passing to the east." Ryan nodded, his eyes turning back to the vast ocean before him. The Ocean Guardian was no ordinary ship. Equipped with cutting-edge technology for research and environmental monitoring, its mission went beyond simple patrols. They were the silent guardians of the marine ecosystem, always alert to any threat or anomaly. The hours passed quietly, with the crew carrying out their usual tasks. The sun was high in the sky when the alert cry came from the observation post. "Captain, something strange on starboard," shouted Jack, the experienced observer whose keen eyesight had saved more lives than he could count. Ryan grabbed the binoculars, directing his gaze to where Jack was pointing. At first, he saw nothing but gentle waves. But then, something emerged for an instant before submerging again, something large, grey, and decidedly out of place. "Impossible," Ryan muttered, adjusting the focus of the binoculars. Sarah, who was beside him analyzing water samples, noticed the change in the captain's posture. "What is it, Captain? What do you see?" Ryan lowered the binoculars, his face a mixture of disbelief and concern. "Prepare the rescue boat. I think we have an elephant adrift in the ocean." The captain's declaration was met with incredulous looks and murmurs of astonishment. An elephant? In the middle of the ocean? It seemed like something out of a fantastic tale, not a real maritime patrol. "Captain, are you sure?" questioned Mike, the first mate, a robust man with years of experience at sea. "Yes, maybe it's just a tree trunk or—" Ryan interrupted him with a firm gesture. "I know what I saw, Mike, and if I'm right, we have a creature in extreme danger. We can't waste time on speculation. Prepare the boat." "Now!" The authority in the captain's voice set the crew in immediate motion. The deck, previously calm, transformed into a whirlwind of activity. Sailors ran from side to side, preparing rescue equipment, ropes, buoys, and medical supplies. Sarah, her heart racing with adrenaline, and the prospect of such an unusual rescue, approached Ryan. "Captain, how could an elephant have gotten out here?" Ryan shook his head, his eyes never leaving the point on the horizon where he had spotted the creature. "I have no idea, Sarah. But at this moment, this how doesn't matter. Our priority is to save that life." As the crew prepared, Ryan called a quick meeting with the team leaders. Mike Chi, the first mate, Dr. Emily, the onboard veterinarian, and Tom, the head of the rescue team, gathered around an improvised map on the deck. "Listen carefully," Ryan began, his deep voice cutting through the buzz around them. "We're about to face an unprecedented situation. An elephant in the ocean is not something we've trained for, but it's our responsibility to do everything in our power to save it." Dr. Emily, a middle-aged woman with gentle eyes and hands calloused from years of treating marine animals, spoke up. "Captain, if it really is an elephant, it will be exhausted and frightened. We'll need to act with extreme caution not to stress it further." Tom, a tall, muscular man, nodded. "My team is ready, Captain. We have ropes, containment nets, and flotation equipment. But how are we going to handle the weight of an elephant?" Ryan pondered for a moment before responding. "We'll have to improvise. Use all available resources. Buoys, wood, anything that can help keep the animal afloat." Dr. Emily, "Prepare a cocktail of vitamins and electrolytes. It's probably dehydrated." As they discussed the rescue details, Sarah observed the horizon with binoculars. Suddenly, she let out an exclamation. "Captain, I see it. It really is an elephant. Sarah's confirmation sent a shockwave through the crew. The reality of the situation finally set in. They were about to attempt the impossible. Ryan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. This was not just another day at sea. It was a moment that would test every skill, every resource, and every ounce of courage they possessed. "All right, team," he said, his voice laden with determination. "You know what to do. Let's save that elephant." With those words, the most unusual and challenging rescue operation in the history of the Ocean Guardian began. As the rescue boat was lowered into the water and the team prepared to face the unknown, one question hung in the air. How did an elephant end up in the middle of the ocean? The answer, they suspected, would be as extraordinary as the rescue they were about to attempt. The rescue boat cut through the waves with determination, leaving a trail of foam in its wake. On board, Tom led his rescue team, his eyes fixed on the distant point where the elephant struggled to stay afloat. Beside him, Dr. Emily held her medical bag firmly, her face a mask of concentration. "We're approaching," Tom shouted to be heard above the roar of the engine and wind. "Prepare the ropes and buoys." As they drew closer, the true magnitude of the challenge they faced became clear. The elephant, an adult male, was thrashing in the water, its trunk raised like an improvised periscope, its large, frightened eyes fixed on the approaching boat. "My God," Emily whispered. "How are we going to get a creature of this size out of the water?" Tom swallowed hard, but his voice remained firm. "One step at a time, Doctor. First, let's stabilize it." On the Ocean Guardian, Captain Ryan observed the scene through high-powered binoculars. Beside him, Sarah monitored weather and maritime data on a tablet. "Captain," she said, concern evident in her voice, "the currents are getting stronger, and there's a cloud formation approaching from the east." Ryan nodded gravely. "Warn the rescue team, they need to be quick." Back on the boat, Tom and his team began to throw ropes towards the elephant. The first attempt failed, the rope falling meters away from the panicking animal. "Again!" Tom ordered. "We have to get a loop around it." After several frustrated attempts, they finally managed to pass a rope around the elephant's torso. The animal trumpeted loudly, a sound of fear and confusion that echoed across the waters. "Easy, big guy," Emily murmured, preparing a syringe with a mild sedative. "We're here to help." With extreme care, the team began to pull the elephant closer to the boat. The animal weighed tons, and each movement threatened to overturn the vessel. "Careful!" Tom shouted when a particularly strong wave hit them, nearly knocking 2 team members into the water. Meanwhile, on the ship, Ryan received an urgent transmission from the meteorological center. "Captain," it was Mike's tense voice, "we just received an alert. A storm is forming rapidly. We have less than 2 hours before it hits us." Ryan felt his stomach sink. The situation, already precarious, had just become potentially catastrophic. He grabbed the radio, his voice cutting through the air with authority. "Tom, you need to speed up. A storm is on its way." On the boat, Tom received the message with a tense nod. They had managed to stabilize the elephant with buoys and ropes, but hoisting it onto the ship seemed an impossible task. "Doctor..." "Emily," Tom called, "we need that sedation now. If he keeps thrashing, we're going to lose control." Emily nodded, approaching the edge of the boat with the syringe in hand. With a precise movement, she administered the sedative at the base of the elephant's ear. The effect was almost immediate, with the animal visibly relaxing in the water. "Great work, Doctor," Tom praised. "Now, let's try to move him." The team worked tirelessly, using all available ropes and flotation equipment to create a sort of improvised raft around the elephant. All the while, the waves grew higher and the sky darker. Back on the Ocean Guardian, Sarah worked frantically on the onboard computers, seeking a solution. "Captain," she called, her eyes shining with a sudden idea. "What if we use the ship's cranes? If we can bring the elephant close enough, maybe we can hoist it directly onto the deck." Ryan pondered for a moment, his eyes assessing the sea conditions and the elephant's position. It was risky, but it could be their only chance. "Good idea, Sarah," he said, already moving to the communication system. "Mike, prepare the cranes. We're going to attempt a direct rescue." The news of the new plan was received with a mixture of relief and apprehension by the team on the boat. They knew that moving the elephant close enough to the ship would be a huge challenge, especially with the sea becoming increasingly agitated. "All right, people," Tom said, his voice firm despite the evident fatigue. "Let's tow him, slowly and carefully." The process was agonizingly slow. Each meter gained was a battle against the waves and the elephant's weight. Rain began to fall, first a light drizzle, then in heavy drops that made visibility difficult. On the deck of the Ocean Guardian, the crew prepared for the hoisting operation. Safety nets were extended, medical teams stood ready, and the crane operators took their positions, prepared for the most delicate maneuver of their careers. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the boat managed to bring the elephant within reach of the cranes. Ryan, who had come down to the deck to personally supervise the operation, gave the signal. "Now!" he shouted, his voice almost lost in the roar of the approaching storm. The cranes hummed, their ropes descending towards the semi-conscious elephant. With surprising precision, considering the conditions, the team managed to pass the ropes around the animal's body. "Start hoisting," Ryan ordered. "Slowly." The elephant began to be lifted from the water, tons of weight suspended by steel cables. The crew watched with bated breath, each second an eternity of tension. Then, when the elephant was halfway between the rough sea and the ship's deck, a deafening boom cut through the air. Lightning struck the sea not far away, illuminating the scene with an eerie light. The shock made the elephant stir, swinging dangerously in the cables. For a terrifying moment, it seemed he would fall back into the sea. "Hold tight!" Ryan shouted, his heart pounding in his chest. "We can't lose him now." The crew mobilized, using additional ropes to stabilize the animal. Slowly, inch by inch, they managed to bring it to the deck, with a dull thud that made the entire ship shudder. The elephant finally touched the deck of the Ocean Guardian. A roar of joy and relief erupted from the crew, muffled only by the sound of the storm that now completely enveloped them. Ryan, soaked by the rain but with a triumphant smile on his face, approached the exhausted animal. Dr. Emily was already by its side, checking its vital signs. "How is he, Doctor?" the captain asked, having to shout to be heard above the howling wind. Emily looked up, her eyes shining with emotion. "He'll survive, Captain. Thanks to you and this incredible team, he'll survive." As the storm raged around them, the crew of the Ocean Guardian gathered around their unlikely passenger. They had accomplished the impossible, but they knew the journey was far from over. Ryan looked at the darkened horizon, aware that the challenges that awaited them could be even greater than the rescue itself. How would they explain this? How would they care for an elephant aboard a ship? And more importantly, how had it gotten there in the first place? While these questions swirled in his mind, Ryan knew one thing for certain. This would be a story that none of them would ever forget. The storm continued to roar outside, but inside the Ocean Guardian, an atmosphere of exhaustion and triumph hung in the air. The deck, normally immaculate, was covered with rescue equipment, soaked ropes, and muddy footprints. At the center of it all, lying on an improvised tarp, was the elephant. Its breathing heavy but stable. Dr. Emily worked tirelessly, monitoring the animal's vital signs and administering fluids intravenously. Her graying hair was plastered to her forehead with sweat and rain, but her eyes shone with determination. "How is he, Doctor?" Captain Ryan asked, approaching with careful steps. Emily looked up, a tired smile on her face. "He's stabilizing, Captain. It's a miracle he survived so long in the water. He must have an incredible will to live." Ryan nodded, his eyes fixed on the sleeping giant. "Any idea how he got here?" Before Emily could answer, Sarah came running up, a tablet in hand and excitement in her voice. "Captain, I think we've discovered something." Ryan and Emily turned to the young oceanographer, curiosity etched on their faces. Sarah continued, barely containing her enthusiasm. "We were analyzing the data from the ocean currents and comparing it with recent reports. 3 days ago, a tropical storm hit a small island about 200 kilometers from here. The island has an elephant sanctuary." The revelation fell like a bomb among them. Pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together. "Are you saying," Ryan began, his mind quickly processing the implications, Yes, Sarah completed. We believe our friend here was swept out to sea during that storm. He must have been adrift for days before we found him. Emily shook her head, amazed. That explains his state of dehydration and exhaustion. But surviving so long in the ocean, it's almost unbelievable. As they discussed this new information, Mike, the first mate, approached with a worried expression. Captain, we have another problem. The media somehow got wind of the rescue. We're receiving dozens of calls from reporters wanting confirmation and details. Ryan frowned. The last thing they needed now was a media circus. How did they find out so quickly? Mike shrugged. I'm not sure. But I suspect someone from the team may have posted something on social media during the rescue. The captain sighed deeply. The situation was complicated enough without adding media frenzy to the mix. All right, let's deal with this. Mike, prepare an official statement. Keep it vague for now. Just say we rescued an endangered marine animal and that more details will be provided when it's safe to do so. As Mike walked away to carry out the order, Sarah looked anxiously at Ryan. Captain, what are we going to do now? We can't just keep an elephant on board indefinitely. Ryan pondered for a moment, his gaze alternating between the elephant and the storm outside. As soon as the weather improves, we'll contact the sanctuary authorities. They're probably already looking for him. In the meantime, we'll do what we can to keep him comfortable and healthy. The following hours were a whirlwind of activity. The team took turns caring for the elephant, which gradually began to show signs of recovery. Dr. Emily didn't leave its side, constantly monitoring its condition. In the command center, Ryan and his team worked tirelessly, coordinating with coastal authorities, answering urgent questions from naval headquarters, and trying to keep the situation under control. Meanwhile, on social media, rumors and speculation ran wild. Hashtags like Mike's the Elephant and Hush Heroic Guardian were going viral, with people from all over the world expressing admiration for the daring rescue. As night fell, the storm finally began to subside. The elephant, now more alert, looked around curiously, its trunk occasionally extending to explore its new environment. Sarah, who had quickly become attached to the animal, approached it with a bucket of fresh water. Hey, big guy, she said softly. You must be thirsty, right? To the surprise and delight of all present, the elephant gently extended its trunk, accepting the offer of water. A murmur of admiration ran through the watching crew. He seems to be adapting well, Emily commented, a tired but satisfied smile on her face. Ryan, who was observing the scene from nearby, felt a wave of emotion hit him. In all his years at sea, he had never experienced anything like this. It was more than just a rescue. It was a testament to the resilience of life and the human capacity to unite in the face of the extraordinary. As the night progressed, the crew took turns caring for the elephant and keeping the ship on course. Ryan, unable to sleep, stayed on deck, his thoughts a mixture of concern and admiration. It was then that he noticed Sarah approaching, 2 steaming cups of coffee in her hands. She offered one to the captain, who accepted with a grateful smile. As the group followed Dr. Helena Vega towards the central structure, Captain Jack Thompson's mind raced with questions. The futuristic facility before them seemed to defy everything he thought he knew about science and nature. Dr. Vega, Jack began, his voice a mix of awe and concern. What exactly is the Project Ark? And how does Marino fit into all of this? Helena sighed, her eyes scanning the various enclosures around them. Project Ark is humanity's response to the impending climate crisis, Captain. As sea levels rise and ecosystems collapse, we realize that adaptation might be our only hope for preserving Earth's biodiversity. The group entered a large circular room filled with holographic displays and intricate 3D models of various animals. At the center was a detailed projection of an elephant, one that looked remarkably similar to Marino. Marino, Helena continued, is part of our first generation of successfully adapted large land mammals. We've engineered him and others like him to survive in a world where the boundaries between land and sea are increasingly blurred. Dr. Lucy Weber, the ship's veterinarian, stepped forward, her eyes wide with fascination. The physiological changes I observed in Marino, they're intentional modifications. Helena nodded. Precisely. Denser bone structure to withstand water pressure, modified lung capacity for extended diving, even subtle changes to their digestive system to process marine vegetation. It's all part of preparing them for a future where coastal areas and islands may be submerged. Sarah Jones, the young oceanographer, couldn't contain her mix of excitement and concern. But the ethical implications, altering species on this scale, it's unprecedented. We're well aware of the ethical dilemmas, Ms. Jones, Helena responded, her voice tinged with a hint of defensiveness. But we're facing unprecedented times. Our choices were stark: adapt or watch entire species vanish forever. As they delved deeper into the facility, Jack and his crew were shown more examples of adapted species, birds with fish-like characteristics, primates with webbed appendages, even plants that could thrive in both saltwater and soil. Our work here goes beyond just animals, Helena explained. We're creating entire ecosystems designed to withstand the changing world. It's a holistic approach to preservation. Jack, who had remained thoughtfully silent for a while, finally spoke up. Dr. Vega, while I can see the potential benefits of your work, I have to ask, why the secrecy? Why not share this knowledge with the world? Helena's expression darkened slightly. Fear, Captain. Fear and greed. We've kept our work secret to protect it from those who might exploit it or try to shut us down out of misguided notions of natural order. But now that you're here, she paused, considering her next words carefully. Perhaps it's time for Project Ark to come out of the shadows. As the implications of Helena's words sank in, Marino's trumpet echoed through the facility, as if heralding a new chapter in Earth's history. Jack looked at his crew, then back at Helena. Doctor, I think it's time we had a long talk about how we can help bring this to the world responsibly. The future of our planet might just depend on it. As night fell on the island, the Guardians of the Sea Crew found themselves grappling with the enormity of what they had discovered. They knew that the decisions they would make in the coming days could shape the future of life on Earth for generations to come. Marino, sensing the gravity of the moment, gently approached Jack, placing his trunk on the captain's shoulder in a gesture of trust and solidarity. In that moment, Jack realized that their journey, the incredible voyage that had brought them to this hidden island, was just the beginning of a much greater adventure. As stars twinkled above the island, casting their light on a world on the brink of transformation, the crew of the Guardians of the Sea prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. They knew that bridging the gap between the world they knew and the one Project Ark was preparing for would be no easy task. But with Marino by their side and the weight of their newfound knowledge, they were ready to face whatever the future might hold. The story of Marino, the sea-dwelling elephant, had opened their eyes to a world of possibilities, a world where the lines between land and sea, between what was and what could be, were blurring in ways they never imagined. And as they stood on the precipice of this new frontier, they knew that their real journey was only just beginning. As the night deepened, Captain Jack Thompson and his crew sat with Dr. Helena Vega in a conference room within the heart of the Project Ark facility. The air was thick with tension and excitement as they discussed the implications of what they had discovered. So, Dr. Vega, Jack began, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in his mind. How do you propose we introduce Project Ark to the world? The public reaction could be unpredictable. Helena leaned back in her chair, her eyes reflecting the weight of the decision before them. You're right, Captain. We need to be strategic. A sudden revelation could lead to panic or, worse, attempts to shut us down before we can explain the importance of our work. Sarah Jones, the young oceanographer, spoke up. What if we start with the scientific community, present our findings at a major conference, backed by irrefutable data? Dr. Lucy Weber nodded in agreement. That could work. If we can get the support of respected researchers and conservationists, it might ease the public into accepting the concept. As they debated various approaches, a low rumble shook the building. Alarmed, the group rushed to the windows. Outside, the sky had turned an ominous, dark grey, and the sea was churning violently. A storm, Helena said, her voice tight with concern, and a big one at that. Our meteorological systems have been warning of increasing severe weather patterns. Jack's eyes narrowed as he watched the waves crash against the shore with increasing ferocity. This is it, isn't it? This is why you created Project Ark. It's not just about rising sea levels, it's about adapting to a world of extremes. Helena nodded solemnly. Precisely, Captain. Climate change isn't just about slowly rising waters. It's about rapid, unpredictable shifts in weather patterns. Our adapted species are designed to withstand these new extremes. As if on cue, Marino's trumpet echoed through the facility. The group rushed to the animal enclosures, where they found the modified elephants calmly leading other animals towards reinforced shelters built into the hillside. Incredible, breathed Lucy. They're not just physically adapted. Their behaviors have been modified to respond to these situations. The storm raged on through the night, testing the limits of both the facility and its inhabitants. Jack and his crew worked alongside the Project Ark staff, helping to secure equipment and ensure the safety of the animals. As dawn broke, the storm finally began to subside. The group emerged from the shelters to survey the damage. While there was some destruction to the outer buildings, the core facility and animal enclosures had withstood the tempest. Standing on a hill overlooking the island, Jack turned to Helena. Doctor, I think we've just witnessed the strongest argument for Project Ark. This storm, it's a glimpse of what's to come, isn't it? Helena nodded gravely. Yes, Captain, and it's likely to get worse before it gets better. That's why our work here is so crucial. Jack looked at his crew, seeing the determination in their eyes. Then we have no choice. We need to bring this to the world's attention, and fast. Over the next few days, Jack and his team worked tirelessly with the Project Ark staff to compile data, prepare presentations, and strategize their approach to revealing the project to the world. They decided on a multi-pronged approach, a series of scientific papers to be published simultaneously in leading journals, a documentary showcasing the adapted animals and the facility, and a global press conference featuring Marino as the face of Project Ark. As they prepared to leave the island and set their plan in motion, Jack stood on the beach with Marino. The elephant gently placed his trunk on Jack's shoulder, a gesture that had become familiar over their time together. Well, big guy, Jack said, patting Marino's trunk, ready to change the world. Marino trumpeted in response, a sound that seemed to carry hope for the future. As the Guardians of the Sea set sail, with Marino swimming alongside, Jack knew that they were embarking on their most important mission yet. They weren't just returning an elephant to its home. They were bringing a message of adaptation and hope to a world on the brink of transformation. The horizon stretched before them, vast and unknown. But with the knowledge they now possessed and the remarkable creatures they had encountered, Jack and his crew were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They had become guardians not just of the sea, but of a future where the lines between land and water, between what was and what could be, were blurring in ways they never imagined. As Marino's powerful form cut through the waves beside them, Jack smiled. Their journey was far from over. In fact, he realized it was only just beginning. As the Guardians of the Sea sailed towards the mainland, with Marino swimming gracefully alongside, Captain Jack Thompson couldn't help but reflect on the enormous responsibility they now carried. The knowledge of Project Ark weighed heavily on his mind, and he knew that the coming weeks would be crucial in shaping the world's response to this groundbreaking discovery. Several days into their journey, the ship's communications officer, Tom Harris, rushed to the bridge with urgent news. Captain, we're receiving multiple distress calls from coastal areas. It seems the storm we experienced at the island was just the beginning of a larger weather system. Several cities are reporting severe flooding and damage. Jack's face grew grim. This could be our chance to demonstrate the importance of Project Ark. Tom, contact Dr. Vega. See if she can mobilize any of their adapted animals to assist in rescue operations. Within hours, the world watched in awe as footage emerged of Marino and other modified elephants helping to evacuate flooded areas. Their adapted physiology allowing them to navigate the treacherous waters with ease. Images of webbed-footed primates delivering supplies to stranded residents and amphibious birds scouting for survivors went viral across social media platforms. Dr. Lucy Weber, who had been monitoring Marino's vital signs remotely, marveled at the data she was receiving. It's incredible, Captain. Marino's body is perfectly adapted for this environment. His stamina, oxygen efficiency, and navigation skills in the water are off the charts. Sarah Jones, who had been coordinating with news outlets, added, "The public response is overwhelming. People are fascinated by these animals and are demanding to know more about where they came from and how they were created." Jack nodded, realizing that the time for reveal had come sooner than they had anticipated. "All right, let's move forward with our plan. Sarah, set up the press conference for as soon as we dock. Lucy, prepare your scientific data for release. It's time to introduce the world to Project Ark." As they approached the mainland, crowds had already gathered at the portee, news of the extraordinary rescue animals having spread like wildfire. The sight of Marino swimming alongside the ship drew gasps and cheers from the onlookers. The press conference that followed was unlike anything the world had seen before. Captain Jack, flanked by his crew and Dr. Helena Vega, who had flown in for the occasion, stood before a sea of reporters and cameras. Marino stood nearby, a living testament to the incredible adaptations they were about to reveal. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jack began, his voice steady and clear, "what you've witnessed over the past few days is not a miracle, but the result of years of groundbreaking scientific work. We are here to introduce you to Project Ark, an initiative designed to preserve and adapt Earth's biodiversity in the face of rapid climate change." As Jack and Helena took turns explaining the project, showing video footage of the facility and presenting Lucy's scientific data, the world watched in stunned silence. The implications of what they were revealing were staggering. Questions from the reporters came rapid fire. Is this ethical? What are the long-term effects of these modifications? Could this technology be applied to humans? Jack and his team answered as best they could, emphasizing the careful research and ethical considerations that had gone into every aspect of Project Ark. In the days that followed, the world erupted into debate. Scientists clamored for more information. Ethicists argued over the morality of species modification, and governments scrambled to develop policies to address this new reality. But amidst the chaos, a sense of hope began to emerge. People started to see Project Ark not as a threat, but as a potential solution to the looming climate crisis. The adapted animals, with Marino as their ambassador, became symbols of resilience and adaptation in a rapidly changing world. As Jack watched Marino interact gently with a group of awestruck children at a public event, he felt a sense of pride and purpose. They had taken an incredible risk in revealing Project Ark to the world, but seeing the growing understanding and acceptance in people's eyes, he knew it had been the right decision. The journey that had begun with the rescue of a single elephant in the open ocean had led to a paradigm shift in how humanity viewed its relationship with nature. As Marino's trumpet rang out, clear and strong, Jack realized that they had not just saved an animal or revealed a secret project. They had opened the door to a new era of coexistence between humans and the natural world, one where adaptation and harmony might just ensure a future for all species on our ever-changing planet. The story of Marino and the Guardians of the Sea was far from over. In fact, Jack mused as he patted Marino's trunk. It was clear that their greatest adventures and challenges still lay ahead. But with the world now aware of Project Ark and the possibilities it represented, they were ready to face whatever the future might hold, together. As the weeks passed, the world continued to grapple with the implications of Project Ark. Captain Jack Thompson and his crew found themselves at the center of a global conversation about the future of life on Earth. The Guardians of the Sea had become more than just a research vessel. They were now ambassadors for a new era of environmental adaptation. One sunny morning, as the ship docked in New York Harbor for a series of high-profile meetings, Jack stood on the deck with Sarah Jones, watching Marino swim playfully in the water below. "It's hard to believe how much has changed in such a short time," Sarah mused, her eyes following the graceful movements of the adapted elephant. Jack nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "And we're just at the beginning, Sarah. The real work starts now." Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Lucy Weber, who rushed towards them with excitement in her eyes. "Captain!" "Sarah, you won't believe what's happening." Lucy held up her tablet and showing them a live news feed. The headline read, Global Coalition announces ARC Initiative, a worldwide effort to implement Project ARC technologies. It's incredible, Lucy beamed. The governments and private organizations from around the world are pooling resources to expand Project ARC. They're talking about creating adapted wildlife reserves in vulnerable coastal areas, developing new conservation strategies based on our research. Jack felt a surge of pride and hope. This is exactly what we were aiming for, a global response to a global challenge. As they discussed the news, Tom Harris, the communications officer, approached with another update. Captain, we've just received an invitation from the United Nations. They want us to present Project ARC at a special session of the General Assembly next month. The gravity of the situation hit Jack. They had started this journey as a simple oceanographic research team, and now they were about to address the leaders of the world. Over the next few weeks, the crew worked tirelessly to prepare for their UN presentation. They compiled data, refined their arguments, and even prepared a special demonstration with Merino and some of the other adapted animals. The day of the UN session arrived, and the atmosphere was electric. The General Assembly Hall was packed with delegates from every nation, all eager to hear about the project that had captured the world's imagination. As Jack took the podium, with Merino standing majestically beside him, he felt the weight of the moment. "Distinguished delegates," he began, his voice steady and clear, "we stand at a crossroads in human history. The challenges we face from climate change are unprecedented, but so are our opportunities to adapt and evolve." He went on to outline the principles of Project ARC, emphasizing not just the scientific achievements, but the philosophical shift it represented, a move towards working with nature rather than against it. As he spoke, Merino and other adapted animals demonstrated their unique abilities, drawing gasps and applause from the assembled leaders. Dr. Lucy Weber presented compelling scientific data, while Sarah Jones spoke passionately about the potential for global cooperation in implementing Project ARC technologies. The response was overwhelming. Nation after nation pledged support for the ARC initiative. Plans were made for international research centers, adapted wildlife reserves, and educational programs to prepare the next generation for a changing world. As the session concluded, Jack found himself surrounded by world leaders eager to shake his hand and discuss further collaboration. In that moment, he realized that their journey had transcended simple scientific discovery. They had become catalysts for a global movement. Later that evening, as the crew celebrated on board the Guardians of the Sea, Jack slipped away to the deck. He found Merino there, gazing out at the city skyline. "Well, big guy," Jack said, patting the elephant's trunk, "we did it. We've set the world on a new course." Merino trumpeted softly, as if in agreement. As Jack looked out at the horizon, he knew that their work was far from over. The challenges ahead were immense, implementing Project ARC on a global scale, navigating the ethical complexities of species adaptation, and continuing to push the boundaries of what was possible. But as he stood there with Merino, watching the sun set on a world that was already beginning to change, Jack felt a profound sense of hope. They had shown that adaptation and cooperation were not just possible, but essential for the future of life on Earth. The Guardians of the Sea had embarked on this journey to save one extraordinary animal, but in doing so, they had opened the door to saving countless species, and perhaps even humanity itself. As night fell and the stars began to twinkle above, Jack knew that their greatest adventures were still to come. The world was changing, and they would be at the forefront, guiding humanity towards a future where the lines between land and sea, between human and nature, were not boundaries, but bridges to a more harmonious and resilient world. The story of Merino and the Guardians of the Sea was far from over. In fact, Jack realized with a smile, it was just beginning. As the months passed, the Guardians of the Sea found themselves at the forefront of a global transformation. Their ship had become a floating laboratory and education center, traveling from coast to coast, demonstrating the potential of Project ARC and helping to establish new adapted wildlife reserves. One crisp autumn morning, as they approached the coast of Brazil, Captain Jack Thompson stood on the bridge, reflecting on how far they'd come. Beside him, Merino, now a global icon of adaptation and resilience, trumpeted softly. As if sensing his companion's contemplative mood, "Captain," Sarah Jones called out, interrupting his thoughts, "we're receiving a priority message from the International Climate Response Team." Jack turned his attention to the incoming transmission. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the lead coordinator of the Global Arc Initiative, appeared on the screen. "Captain Thompson, we need your team's expertise urgently," she began, her face etched with concern. "We're tracking a massive hurricane forming in the Atlantic. It's unlike anything we've seen before, a result of the intensifying climate patterns. We believe this could be the first real test of our adapted ecosystems." Jack's expression turned serious. "What do you need from us?" "Doctor, we want the Guardians to head to the Caribbean. You'll be coordinating with local authorities and our newly established ARC reserves. Your experience with Merino and the other adapted species will be crucial in managing this crisis." Within hours, the Guardians of the Sea had changed course, racing towards the Caribbean. As they sailed, the crew prepared for what could be their most challenging mission yet. Dr. Lucy Weber worked tirelessly, analyzing data on how the adapted animals might respond to extreme weather conditions. "The modifications we've made should help them withstand the storm," she explained during a briefing. "But this will be our first real-world test on such a large scale." Sarah coordinated with coastal communities, helping them prepare for the coming storm and instructing them on how to work with the adapted wildlife in their area. As they approached the hurricane's projected path, the sky darkened ominously. The sea churned violently, waves crashing against the ship with increasing force. But amidst the chaos, something remarkable was happening. From the bridge, Jack and his crew watched in awe as adapted marine life began to gather around the ship. Schools of modified fish, capable of surviving in both fresh and salt water, moved in coordinated patterns, seemingly guiding smaller sea creatures to safer depths. In the distance, they could see the silhouettes of adapted elephants like Merino, leading land animals to higher ground and using their trunks to clear debris from evacuation routes. "It's incredible," Sarah breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "They're not just surviving the storm, they're actively helping to mitigate its effects." As the hurricane made landfall, the Guardians of the Sea worked tirelessly alongside local authorities and the adapted wildlife. Merino and his kin used their strength to reinforce flood barriers. Amphibious primates swiftly delivered supplies to stranded residents. Birds with fish-like characteristics scouted for people in need of rescue, their unique adaptations allowing them to navigate both air and water with ease. Throughout the ordeal, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. This was exactly why Project ARC had been created, to help life on Earth not just survive, but thrive in the face of a changing climate. As the storm finally began to subside, the true impact of their work became clear. While there was certainly damage, the loss of life and long-term ecological impact was significantly less than what would have been expected from a storm of this magnitude. In the aftermath, as they helped with recovery efforts, Jack received another call from Dr. Rodriguez. Her face was tired but beaming with pride. "Captain, the data we're receiving is extraordinary. The adapted ecosystems have shown resilience beyond our wildest expectations. And the way the modified animals actively assisted in protecting human communities, it's revolutionary." Jack smiled, looking out at Merino, who was helping to clear a beach of debris. "They're not just adapted to survive, Doctor. They're adapted to coexist with us, to be partners in facing whatever challenges come our way." As news of the successful response to the hurricane spread, the Guardians of the Sea found themselves once again in the global spotlight. Their experience became a powerful testament to the potential of Project ARC, accelerating its implementation worldwide. In the weeks that followed, Jack and his crew were invited to speak at conferences, consult with governments, and inspire a new generation of scientists and conservationists. The line between land and sea, between human innovation and natural adaptation, was blurring in ways they had only begun to imagine. One evening, as they sailed towards their next destination, Jack stood on the deck with Merino. The adapted elephant gently wrapped his trunk around the captain's shoulders, a gesture that had become a symbol of the bond between humans and the new, adapted natural world. "We've come a long way, old friend," Jack mused, patting Merino's trunk, "but something tells me our journey is far from over." As if in response, Marino trumpeted, his call echoing across the waves, a sound of hope, of challenge, and of the endless possibilities that lay ahead. The Guardians of the Sea sailed on, ready to face whatever the future might bring, knowing that they were no longer just observers of the natural world, but active participants in its evolution and preservation. The story of Marino, the sea-dwelling elephant, had opened the door to a new chapter in Earth's history, one where adaptation, cooperation, and harmony between species might just be the key to surviving and thriving in a changing world. As the Guardians of the Sea continued their journey, the world around them was changing at an unprecedented pace. The success of Project Ark in mitigating the impact of the Caribbean hurricane had sparked a global revolution in environmental adaptation and conservation efforts. One morning, as they approached the coast of Australia, Captain Jack Thompson received an urgent message from the International Climate Response Team. Dr. Elena Rodriguez' face appeared on the screen, her expression a mix of excitement and concern. "Captain Thompson, we have a new situation that requires your expertise," she began. "The Great Barrier Reef is showing signs of rapid decline due to ocean acidification and rising temperatures. We need to implement Project Ark principles there immediately." Jack nodded gravely. "We're on it, Doctor. What's the plan?" "We're going to attempt something we've never done before," Elena explained. "We want to introduce adapted coral species and marine life to help rejuvenate the reef. Your team's experience with Marino and other modified species will be crucial in this delicate operation." Over the next few weeks, the Guardians of the Sea worked tirelessly alongside marine biologists and local conservationists. They introduced specially adapted coral polyps that could withstand higher temperatures and acidity levels, modified fish species, designed to symbiotically support the new Coral E, were carefully released into the ecosystem. Marino, ever the star of their operations, played a crucial role. His ability to dive to great depths and maneuver delicately despite his size made him invaluable in placing larger coral structures and guiding schools of adapted fish to their new homes. Dr. Lucy Weber spent long hours in the ship's lab, monitoring the progress of the new species and making real-time adjustments to their genetic profiles. "It's a delicate balance," she explained during a team briefing. "We need to ensure these new species can thrive without overwhelming the existing ecosystem." Sarah Jones took charge of community outreach, working with local Aboriginal groups to incorporate their traditional knowledge into the reef restoration efforts. "This isn't just about scientific solutions," she reminded the team. "It's about working in harmony with the people who have been guardians of these waters for thousands of years." As weeks turned into months, the results of their efforts began to show. Areas of the reef that had been barren and bleached started to show signs of life. The adapted coral grew at an accelerated rate, and the new fish species helped to maintain a balanced ecosystem. One day, as Jack and his team were surveying the progress from their underwater observation pod, they witnessed something extraordinary. A pod of adapted dolphins, part of a parallel Project Ark initiative, swam into view. These dolphins, modified to withstand changing ocean conditions, began to interact with the new reef ecosystem in ways that no one had anticipated. "Look at that," Sarah exclaimed, pointing to where the dolphins were using their enhanced echolocation to break up clusters of invasive species threatening the new coral. "They're actively protecting the reef," Jack watched in awe. "This is more than we ever imagined. And it's not just about creating species that can survive. We're developing entire ecosystems that work together to thrive." As news of the Great Barrier Reef's revival spread, the Guardians of the Sea once again found themselves at the center of global attention. Their success sparked similar projects in threatened marine ecosystems around the world. But with success came new challenges. Ethical debates intensified over the extent of human intervention in natural systems. Some argued that they were playing God, while others saw it as humanity's responsibility to correct the damage it had caused. Jack and his crew often found themselves navigating these complex philosophical and ethical waters. They were invited to speak at the United Nations, participate in global environmental summits, and consult on international policies regarding genetic modification and ecosystem management. Through it all, Marino remained a constant presence, a living symbol of the bridge between human innovation and natural adaptation. His gentle interactions with both the new marine life and human observers helped to ease fears and build trust in the Project Ark initiatives. One evening, as the sun set over the rejuvenated Great Barrier Reef, Jack stood on the deck of the Guardians of the Sea, Marino by his side. The adapted elephant gently sprayed water from his trunk, creating a rainbow in the fading light. "You know, Marino," Jack mused, patting the elephant's side. "Time when we first found you in the open ocean, I never could have imagined where that rescue would lead us. We set out to save one life and ended up changing the course of life on Earth." Marino trumpeted softly, as if in agreement. As they stood there, watching the vibrant new ecosystem teeming with life below the waves, Jack realized that their journey was far from over. The work they had done was just the beginning. There were still countless challenges ahead, ethical dilemmas to navigate, new threats to face, and endless possibilities to explore. But as the Guardians of the Sea prepared to set sail for their next mission, Jack felt a sense of hope stronger than ever before. They had shown that with innovation, compassion, and a willingness to adapt, humanity could not only coexist with nature, but help it flourish in the face of unprecedented change. The story of Marino, the sea-dwelling elephant, had evolved into something far greater. A tale of global transformation, of bridges built between species and ecosystems, and of a future where the lines between land and sea, between human and nature, were not boundaries, but gateways to a more resilient and harmonious world. As night fell and the stars reflected on the calm sea, Jack knew that their greatest adventures still lay ahead. The world was changing, and they would be there. Guardians not just of the sea, but of a new era of life on Earth. As the Guardians of the Sea continued their global mission, the impact of Project Ark expanded far beyond their initial expectations. The success of the Great Barrier Reef restoration had sparked a wave of similar initiatives worldwide, and the team found themselves at the forefront of a new era in environmental stewardship. One crisp morning, as they sailed towards the Arctic Circle, Captain Jack Thompson received an urgent communication from the International Climate Response Team. Dr. Eleanor Rodriguez appeared on the screen, her face etched with concern. "Captain, we have a critical situation developing in the Arctic," she began. "The ice melt is accelerating at an alarming rate, threatening the entire ecosystem. We need to implement Project Ark strategies immediately to preserve the wildlife and stabilize the region." Jack nodded gravely. "We're on our way, Doctor." "What's the plan?" The next few weeks saw the Guardians of the Sea engaged in their most ambitious project yet. They worked tirelessly to introduce adapted species of Arctic wildlife, polar bears with enhanced swimming capabilities, seals with improved insulation, and even modified plankton designed to absorb more carbon dioxide from the water. Marino, ever adaptable, proved invaluable in the icy waters. His unique physiology allowed him to assist in deploying underwater monitoring equipment and helping to guide adapted marine life to their new habitats. Dr. Lucy Weber spent long hours in the ship's laboratory, fine-tuning the genetic modifications to ensure the new species could thrive in the rapidly changing Arctic environment. "We're not just adapting to current conditions," she explained during a team briefing. "We're anticipating future changes and building resilience into these species." Sarah Jones took on the challenging task of coordinating with indigenous communities across the Arctic region. "Their traditional knowledge is crucial," she emphasized. "We need to blend our scientific approach with centuries of Arctic wisdom." As their work progressed, the team began to see promising results. The adapted species were not only surviving, but actively contributing to the stabilization of the Arctic ecosystem. Modified algae were helping to slow ice melt, while the new wildlife species showed remarkable resilience in the face of changing conditions. However, their success also brought new challenges. The global debate over the ethics of genetic modification and ecosystem engineering intensified. The Guardians of the Sea found themselves at the center of heated discussions about the limits of human intervention in nature. One evening, as they monitored the progress of their Arctic initiatives, Jack stood on the deck with Marino, watching the midnight sun hover over the horizon. "You know, old friend," he mused, Sometimes I wonder if we're doing the right thing. Are we saving the world or changing it beyond recognition? Marino gently wrapped his trunk around Jack's shoulders, a gesture that had become a source of comfort and reassurance over their long journey together. As if in response to Jack's doubts, they witnessed an extraordinary sight. A pod of adapted beluga whales, part of their recent Arctic initiative, surfaced nearby. These whales, modified to better withstand warming waters and changing food sources, began a complex series of vocalizations. Dr. Weber, who had joined them on deck, listened intently to her instruments. "Captain," she said, her voice filled with awe, "these vocalizations, they're not just random. They're communicating complex information about water temperatures, ice conditions, and food sources. It's like they're creating a living, breathing network of environmental data." Jack watched in amazement as the belugas continued their symphony, realizing that they had created something far beyond mere survival adaptations. These creatures were becoming active participants in monitoring and maintaining their ecosystem. As news of their Arctic successes spread, the Guardians of the Sea were once again thrust into the global spotlight. They were invited to present their findings at a special UN summit on climate adaptation. World leaders, scientists, and environmental activists gathered to hear about the revolutionary approaches they had developed. During his address to the summit, Jack spoke passionately about the lessons they had learned. "We set out to adapt wildlife to a changing world," he said, "but in the process, we've had to adapt our own thinking. We're not just creating new species, we're fostering a new relationship between humanity and nature, one of cooperation and mutual support." The summit marked a turning point in global environmental policy. Nations pledged to establish a network of Project Ark reserves across every continent and major ocean. The Guardians of the Sea were tasked with overseeing this massive undertaking, training new teams and sharing their expertise. As they prepared to embark on this new phase of their journey, Jack gathered his crew on the deck of their faithful ship. Marino stood beside him, a living symbol of how far they had come. "We've traveled a long way from that day we found Marino in the open ocean," Jack began, his voice filled with emotion. "What started as a rescue mission has become a mission to rescue our entire planet. The challenges ahead are enormous, but so are the possibilities." As the crew cheered their agreement, Marino raised his trunk and trumpeted, his call echoing across the Arctic expanse. It was a sound of hope, of challenge, and of the incredible journey that still lay ahead. The Guardians of the Sea set sail once more, ready to face whatever the future might bring. They had become more than just guardians of the oceans. They were now guardians of a new era in Earth's history, where the lines between species, between ecosystems, DARs, and between human innovation and natural evolution were blurring in ways they had only begun to imagine. As they navigated towards new horizons, Jack knew that their story, the incredible tale that had begun with a sea-dwelling elephant, was far from over. In fact, he realized with a smile, it was just beginning its most exciting chapter yet. As the Guardians of the Sea continued their global mission, Captain Jack Thompson found himself reflecting on the incredible journey that had begun with Marino's rescue. The adapted elephant had become not just a mascot for their ship, but a symbol of hope for a world grappling with rapid environmental change. Their next destination was the coast of Alaska, where rising sea temperatures were causing significant disruptions to local ecosystems. As they approached the icy waters, Dr. Lucy Weber called the team to the lab for an urgent briefing. "We've received alarming data from our satellite feeds," she explained, pointing to a series of charts on the screen. "The ice melt is accelerating at an unprecedented rate. If this continues, we could see catastrophic effects on marine life in the region." Sarah Jones, who had been coordinating with local environmental groups, added, "The indigenous communities here have been reporting unusual migration patterns in whales and seals. They're worried about the impact on their traditional way of life." Captain Jack nodded gravely. "All right, team. We need to implement Project Ark protocols immediately. Lucy, I want you to start working on adaptations for the local marine species. Sarah, continue liaising with the local communities. We need their traditional knowledge now more than ever." As the team sprung into action, Marino trumpeted from the deck, seemingly eager to assist. Jack smiled, remembering how far they'd come since finding the elephant adrift in the ocean. Over the next few weeks, the Guardians of the Sea worked tirelessly. They introduced adapted species of plankton designed to thrive in warmer waters, modified seals with enhanced diving capabilities to reach deeper, cooler waters, and even experimented with creating more resilient forms of sea ice. Marino played a crucial role, using his strength and newly acquired aquatic skills to help deploy underwater monitoring equipment and guide schools of adapted fish to their new habitats. One chilly morning, as Jack stood on the bridge watching Marino assist with the launch of a new underwater drone, he received an urgent call from Dr. Elena Rodriguez at the International Climate Response Team. "Captain Thompson," she began, her voice tense, "we're detecting a massive undersea methane release near your location. If it reaches the surface, it could accelerate global warming dramatically." Jack's mind raced. This was exactly the kind of catastrophic event they had feared. "Understood, Doctor. We'll do everything we can to contain it." Quickly assembling his team, Jack outlined the situation. "This is what Project Ark has been preparing for. We need to use every tool and adapted species at our disposal to prevent this methane from reaching the atmosphere." Dr. Weber proposed using their newly developed methane-consuming bacteria, while Sarah suggested enlisting the help of local whale pods that had been part of their recent adaptation program. As they put their plan into action, Marino once again proved invaluable. The adapted elephant, with his enhanced lung capacity and diving abilities, was able to help deploy the bacteria at depths that would have been challenging for human divers. For days, the Guardians of the Sea worked around the clock, coordinating a complex operation involving adapted marine life, advanced technology, and the skills of their incredible crew. Marino seemed to be everywhere at once, from diving to assist with deep-sea equipment to using his trunk to clear icebergs that threatened their operation. Finally, after a tense week, they received the news they had been hoping for. The methane levels were dropping, and the immediate crisis had been averted. As the team celebrated their success, Jack couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. What had started as a simple rescue mission had evolved into a global effort to reshape humanity's relationship with nature. Standing on the deck with Marino by his side, Jack looked out at the vast expanse of the Arctic Ocean. The sun glinted off the ice, and in the distance, he could see pods of adapted whales breaching the surface, their new bioluminescent patterns glowing softly. "You know, Marino," Jack said, patting the elephant's trunk, "when we first found you, I thought we were saving one life, but really you were showing us how to save them all." Marino trumpeted softly, as if in agreement. As they stood there, watching the sun set on another day of their extraordinary journey, Jack knew that their work was far from over. But with Marino and his dedicated crew by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges the changing world might bring. The Guardians of the Sea had become more than just a ship and its crew. They were now part of a global movement, pioneers in a new age of environmental stewardship. And at the heart of it all was Marino, the sea-dwelling elephant who had changed the course of history. As night fell and the stars began to twinkle above the Arctic waters, Jack knew that their greatest adventures were still to come. The world was changing, and they would be there. Guardians not just of the sea, but of a new era of life on Earth.